What's good, y'all? Welcome back to the Cycle 365. This is Miniseries Episode 6. I am your host, Simon Villanos, and with me I got a special guest. Why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
My name is Alysia. I have been a cheerleader for 7 years, 4 years in high school and 3 years in college at UNC.
Yeah, for sure. And she's a really good friend of mine. We go way back, I would say, I have her on because we've really never talked about cheerleading or dance, surprisingly ever, which is kind of weird because here at the Cycle we try to hit all the sports. So yeah, this is a good thing. Alysia, you are the second female on this podcast too, so congratulations.
Thank you. I'm honored.
Yeah, but hey, this is gonna be good. So right off the bat, we kind of ask everyone this, but what was the highlight of your, cheerleading career?
I would say the highlight of my career was probably my last year in college. That was the 1 year that I actually got to compete. So for cheer, we do one really big competition a year. And so that was Nationals in Daytona Beach, Florida. And that was just a really cool experience to be able to compete against a bunch of different colleges from around the whole country. And we ended up placing 6th in our division, which was really awesome. And so I think that experience is one of the most memorable, just because of how much work goes into it and how much our team really comes together for that one performance.
Yeah, for sure. And we'll go right into that work later on in the show. It's just, like I said, it's one of those things that we haven't really talked about a ton. I personally don't have that experience as a cheerleader or a dancer, and I know for a fact that nobody else has either. So this is going to be really fun. And so let's get down to the basics of it. So for you, why did you cheer for as long as you did? What was appealing to you as a cheerleader and all that?
I think just the diversity of the sport in general. The sport has a game day section where that's kind of the typical view of what cheerleading is when you're at football, basketball, volleyball games cheering for the other sports, which that is a super fun aspect of it. But then there's also the whole competitive side of it where you get to compete against other teams, and really that is cheers moment to kind of be the main event compared to game day when they're on the sidelines. So I think just the diversity of it's changing throughout so much of it. So in high school, we focused a lot on the game day, and then as I went to college, we focused a lot more on the competitive side. So it just was always changing, and there's always room for growth, which I thought was really cool and kept me really interested in it. So
yeah, for sure. And so you already kind of mentioned, the differences between high school and college cheer. Was there, still competitive cheer competitions in high school? Because I know some cheer squads don't do that. So was there for you?
Yeah, so it really depends on the school.
Yeah.
And there's cheer within high schools, but then there's also club cheer, which we call all-star cheer, and that's the competitive side. And you could start that really young, I think at 4 or maybe younger. Wow. Which I didn't even know that was a thing, or I would have done it. So that's kind of a bummer. But yeah, so it starts really young, but in high schools it's really up to the school whether they're going to do competition or just be game day. So my high school, my freshman year, we did game day, but then the rest freshman year we did competition, okay. But then the rest we just did game day. So yeah, it was interesting, but that was just my school. A lot of other schools do competition too. So then they have the balance of both game day and competition cheer.
For sure. And so I got to ask, which one do you prefer more, game day or competition?
I think, so I only personally competed twice, and those were some of my favorite moments. So I think I'd probably go with competition, but I still do love game day. It's just, you don't really get as much time to showcase your skills. With a competition, you're working for so long for that little chunk of time that you get to perform and compete. And it's just an incredible experience to have that competitive nature within cheer, because it's not typically seen as a competitive sport. So it's just really fun to have that motivation.
Yeah, for sure. So you would say it's definitely a little bit more complex, right? Competition versus game day, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
There's a lot of different aspects of competition, I would say.
Yeah, for sure. And, I would have to agree. Like I said, I don't know much, but I've definitely went to, not cheer competitions, Oh man, what is it called? Like, I went to like a couple of yours, like I think junior year, where y'all would like showcase something.
Oh yeah, the showcase. So we usually do like a big showcase before we compete, just because like when we go to compete, you have 2 minutes and 30 seconds to do your routine one time, and that's it. So we like to practice it as much as we can to like simulate what it's going to be like, because you really have one shot, and if you screw it up, then that's kind of like, that's it. Like that was it. So we like to do the showcase before we go. That way we can kind of get the same feelings that we would at a competition by having a crowd to like watch us and kind of get our adrenaline spiked and stuff like that.
Okay. No, yeah, that totally makes sense. So that would be, I guess, comparable like to like a preseason type of football game or basketball game, stuff like that, right?
Yeah.
No?
I think so.
Okay.
I think.
It sounds like a little bit more serious, I'm not gonna lie. And like I've seen you do it a couple times, and it's crazy. Like it's so much that like y'all are doing, and like, oh my gosh. I definitely couldn't be a cheerleader. I don't have the flexibility and probably not the strength. Maybe, I don't know.
I bet you can do it.
Yeah? I appreciate that vote of confidence. But yeah, no, it looks really crazy, and like the showcases over at UNC, shout out to Northern Colorado Sko Bears. They're great, honestly. I remember seeing two for sure. One was like right before the CIT championship, or in the CIT. I don't know. It was something like that during the basketball season.
Yep,
do you remember that? Yeah. Dang, that was way back. We're both graduating now, so that's crazy.
Kind of old. It's okay.
I know, but it is what it is. And then the following year, shout out to my boy Big Nate. His girlfriend was on the cheer squad, and I'm pretty sure she was a good friend of yours as well. And so, yeah, it was crazy, you know, and it looked tough. And I don't know why, like, this is something that came up, but I remember the second year I went, it was a showcase, right? And y'all performed the whole thing, and then y'all had like you came up, I think, and a couple other seniors, and talked about your experiences. But then I remember specifically after like everything kind of wrapped up, that like y'all's coaches were like, all right, let's run it back again. And I'm like, okay, wow, like that sounds pretty serious.
Yeah.
Like I don't see many, I don't know. In sports, it's not like, you know, like you play a scrimmage or a preseason game, and then your coaches are like, all right, let's go hit the practice field again because y'all were not like doing your job. So was that kind of the vibe, like, or am I just like way off the mark?
No, so at that routine, like I said before, when we compete, we have 2 minutes and 30 seconds.
Right.
And if you don't hit it, then like those are points deducted from your routine. And at that showcase, we didn't hit all of our skills. Okay. So that means like a certain stunt might have fell down, or like timing was off on something. And so we really need to make sure that we're mastering all of those skills. So our coach tells us at the beginning of that routine, like, anything we don't hit, we're going to do again at the end, because our bodies are going to be tired. And if we can do it when we're tired, then we should be able to do it when we're not tired. So by doing it again after that, it just gives our bodies like the muscle memory to be able to actually hit it and push through and really like fight to make those things hit. Because at that point, then that means we have maybe like 1 to 2 weeks before we're competing for that. So.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, and I assume there are like practices like every week, right? Like every couple days or whatever.
Every day.
Okay, every day?
Yeah.
That's what I thought. Okay.
Yep.
At least on the college level, we'll get into that later, actually. But before we get into that, so this is another question I have. But are there like, I'm pretty sure there are like different positions in cheer, right? Mm-hmm. Why don't you go ahead and explain like what you did, and then I guess some of the positions if you want to.
Okay, so within cheer, there's stunting, which is like kind of like the acrobatic side of it. So you have 2 bases, which are the people that are holding the person, which we call the flyer. And then there's also a back spot. So there's 3 people who are like on the ground, and then 1 person in the air. So I was a flyer, which was fun and a little spooky sometimes, but it was a great time. So yeah, but there's like so many different positions within cheer. Like you can even have people who are just tumblers, which means they're just doing like the tumbling throughout the routine and not stunting quite as much. Or you have people who can do more than one position. So we had some people who could base but could also fly. And that's like really helpful for the team, just because there's limited amount of people on the team, but some skills you really need to like mix up the groups and change around who's doing what. So
right. Okay. Yeah, and that all sounds pretty complicated. I mean, honestly, it's just like any other sport. Like, cheer, in my opinion, is definitely one of the tougher sports. You know, I know there are plenty of over masculine football players, boys basically, who, you know, would like to not give cheer the credit they deserve. And I know you as a cheerleader would probably have some arguments against them. Am I right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
For
and
sure.
yeah, and you know, honestly, that's why we're doing this podcast, you know, or this episode, just so we could dive deeper into that. And so let's start by going into, I guess, how should I say this? Like, y'all's schedule throughout the year, right? Because in most sports, at least, you know, well, I'm a football player. You know that, and the listeners know that. But, you know, there's a couple different phases in our season, in a year. You know, in Texas, it was definitely way more complicated than in Colorado. And you can listen to the last episode 5, where I go into burnout and how, you know, I would have, basically almost, I said 330 days. That's not realistic, but I'd say at least 300 days out of 365 days a year where I'm doing either workouts or football stuff. And, you know, it was intense for me. And so for us, it would consist of, so the off season, right? And then there's like a preseason / like, you know, like introductory summer type of training camp stuff, you know, before the regular season. Am I right? And then after that, we go regular season. And then playoffs or whatever, championship games, bowl games, stuff like that. And then after that, it restarts all over again, back to off-season, winter workouts, 7-on-7, then summer training camp, which was like a 2-month thing. I'm already getting PTSD talking about it. So let's throw it back to you, though. So was cheer similar to that, or maybe a little bit different?
Yeah.
What was the schedule like?
So we have a really long season. So we start in the summer with like non-mandatory practices. Usually that was for high school. High school had non-mandatory practices. Then August, like once school starts, that would be the start of regular season. And then we don't end until about April. So it's like most of the year because we have to cheer for football and then sometimes volleyball and then basketball. So those seasons go from like very long periods of time.
Right.
And then also our competitive season. In high school, the competitive season, here at least, ends in December. So then throughout football season is also competition season. But then for college, our season's about the same length of time. Maybe a little longer because for college, our competitive season is January to about beginning of April. So yeah, we're pretty much working year-round because then once April comes, season's over, but then tryouts are probably either end of April or beginning of May, so then you're preparing for your next tryout, and then right after tryouts in college starts summer practices. So yeah, there's really no stopping. But
Okay.
So yeah, that's with our season. But then with practices, high school wasn't quite as much time. I would say between 3 to 5 days a week. And that would just be like after school for a couple hours. And then on top of games, so like football season, that's usually a game every couple weeks or I don't know, depending on football season. And then basketball was usually a couple more because we had men's and women's basketball.
Right.
So that'd be like 2 games a week about. So that's like on top of practices, which can kind of be a lot. But yeah, and then college was like completely different. So for college, we had practice every single day at 6 a.m.
Oh.
Plus 4 hours a week, gym hours that you just had to do on your own. And then plus appearances. And that's like when athletics or people in the community just want to have cheerleaders there to kind of show like our school support and stuff like that. So if there was like a football game that was like not a home game and it was away, they'd want us to like go to wherever they're watching it and just kind of be there. Or if there was like a grand opening of something, they'd want us to go there. So then you'd have to sign up for that. So there's also that throughout the week. And then on top of games, and in college there's a lot more games. So probably 2 games every week throughout both football, volleyball season, and then basketball season.
Wow.
So yeah, that's a lot.
No,
but it's fun.
Yeah. I mean, it sounds like, well, okay, well, I don't know about me, but like for you, it sounded like it was pretty fun.
Yeah.
Well, that's tough. Yeah. That sounds honestly pretty insane. So let's backtrack a little bit to those practice times, though. So you did say a couple hours. How long would you say they were on average? Because I know with football, at least I'm just gonna go back to Texas because I'm not gonna lie. Like Colorado football programs were pretty easy for me. Like it wasn't as intense, and that's no shade. It's just how it is. Texas, there's a reason why they throw out 1 billion NFL players every year. So in Texas, the way they would do it is that they would have like, and this wasn't just for football; it was for all sports. But basically, like if you were playing a sport, then that was your PE credit, and so that's like a 1 hour block or period. And for us, that was at the end of the day. So it would be 7th period. It would start like it would start maybe 2:30 ish, and then we'd have to be out on the field at 2:45, and then our regular practice days would go from then till 5:30 pretty much every day, except for like obviously game day, and then sometimes if it's like a Monday or a day after the game, we won't practice as long, but usually you never know. Like coaches could honestly hold you all as long as 6 sometimes, and so it was insane. And that was something that we did a lot, as well as doing morning workouts. That was something I always did. I don't know why. Like looking back, it's kind of crazy. Like it's one of those things where like you're a lot older now, but like looking back, it's like, wow, how did young me do all of this stuff and wake up? Yeah, but yeah, it was crazy. And so it would be like 7 a.m. workouts or whatever until we gotta go to class at 8, and then we have football practice and stuff like that. And then the off season was pretty similar as that. The only difference really just being instead of football practice, it was just workouts, and it'd go into 4:30. So why don't you go ahead and tell us like kind of what practice was like, how long it was, and what your experience was?
Yeah, so for college, we had practice at 6 a.m. And so we'd get there, and usually for the first, like, I would say an hour and 15 minutes maybe, we're just working on, like, perfecting our skills. So we'd usually start with tumbling and just warming that up, and then working on just making every skill really solid. So we'd do that, and then we'd go into stunts, and that usually was, I would say, the main focus of the practice, just because that's the part that requires like the most teamwork and like actually being together, where tumbling you could work on your own, which is good too. So so that we'd spend most of the time working on stunts, and then we really wouldn't put the whole routine together for a while. We'd wait a little while just because we want to work on the sections of it. So then once we would work on those things separate, we'd start putting parts of the routine together. So we'd do like the first half of it, and then that'd be like a tumbling pass, jumps, and like the first stunt or something. And then we just work through that a couple times, making sure that we could do it and just building up our endurance for that.
Right.
And then, going on to the next section. And then after we put all that together, we usually do conditioning for about half an hour at the end, and then go to class. So, yeah.
Wow. So in total, how many hours is that typically?
It was like 2 hours. Okay. A little under 2, just because it was like right on the edge of when people had class.
Right, yeah.
So we'd usually end at like 7:45. So
okay.
An hour and 45 minutes about.
That's still a solid amount of time basically every day in college, right? And plus you have like other times where y'all gotta work out and whatnot, right?
And then we also had tumbling every week. So that would be a separate thing where we would go to like an actual cheer gym and have like different coaches that were there who were like specifically there to help us work on getting new skills in tumbling and even like with stunts sometimes. So that was another thing on top of that, but we would do that at night. So that would be Monday nights usually. So like once a week. But,
okay. This is going to sound like a stupid question, but what is tumbling in cheer?
Okay, I'll tell you. So that's like kind of the gymnastics part. So like flips and stuff like that. So like...
So the cool stuff?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So just when people could do like tucks and back handsprings and stuff like that.
Oh, man. I'm getting thrown back to the days where I had to teach gymnastics as a practicum. Ooh. That was scary. Like, teaching a bunch of little kids, that is so scary. Yeah, and we'll get into that. Scary. But, man, okay. So, in your opinion, how difficult is cheer compared to other sports? And feel free to be as biased as possible.
Okay, well, I don't know. I think it's hard to compare because it's just so different. Like, I think every sport has their things that make it really hard, but I think cheer definitely is underappreciated for how difficult it is, because it really takes like a lot of strength, and I don't know, it's hard, like stunting. Like it looks like, oh, she's just being thrown around, but like it takes a lot of like body control to be able to like hold yourself in the air and to like hold another human in the air as they're like spinning and flipping and doing a bunch of different things. So I would say it's pretty hard. I don't know if I could necessarily say it's like harder than like another sport, because like I haven't done other sports and I'm sure they're all really hard, but I think it's definitely harder than people think, because people typically don't see like what goes into a routine, and when we put it forward, like it looks like it's easy because like we've been doing it for a whole year, you know. Okay. Like it doesn't look as hard as it actually feels. Like we only do it for 2.5 minutes, and it's like after that you like can't breathe. And it's like, oh, it's only 2.5 minutes, but it's a lot, you know?
There's a lot going on in that 2.5 minutes. As somebody who has seen it, it's, I don't know, there's just a lot going on. And I didn't ask you this, but like typically, how big were your cheer squads?
I feel like they varied every year. Like on the mat, you could only have about 20 people. But we had more people than that who like just didn't compete. Yeah. So some years we had like 40 people. Some years we had 30. But also we like started out with a lot at the beginning of the year. And by the end of the year, it definitely dwindles down a lot. So it's kind of hard to say.
Is that a consistent thing? Like,
I would say.
Okay.
Yeah. I think just with like the time commitment that it is, and I don't know, just the level of difficulty that I think people don't necessarily expect coming into it. A lot of people end up quitting like halfway through the year or earlier than that, or so that's happened like every year that I've cheered. There's at least a couple people.
Okay.
So
yeah, for sure. And I mean, I feel like that's in a lot of sports, but I think that's definitely an indicator of how tough cheer is, because I ask that because when I watch y'all, it definitely seemed like there were way more than 20 people out there, and there's just so many moving parts, and it's not like y'all are ever really in one place for more than a second even.
Yeah, not really.
Yeah, and like, I mean, especially you as a flyer, you're getting thrown around a ton. Like, I don't know, I wouldn't even bother to count sometimes, to be honest, but it's crazy, you know, and there's so many moving parts, and to be as efficient, you know, performing any routine like that, it's tough, because it's not just you know, like in gymnastics, I guess, like when you're doing a routine or whatnot, usually I guess it would just be you and you could control yourself, right? But when you gotta rely on 19 other people to do your job, I mean, there's gotta be some trust there, am I right?
Oh yeah, I feel like it's one of the sports that requires like trust and teamwork the most, because like you're literally putting your life in other people's hands, and like if one person does something different one time, like it could really mess up the whole routine. Like if they're like one step over to the right and like that's where you're supposed to be, like that really screws up everything. And like judges notice everything. Like you don't think they'll notice something, but they're like, oh, that person was slightly off of the formation, and like that docks you a point. Wow. And like, so you really have to just practice until, it's not like practice until you get it right once. It's like practice until you don't mess up ever. And like that's kind of hard to do.
No, but yeah, for sure.
We do it. So.
Yeah, for sure. It seems super detail oriented, and obviously y'all get judged off of your performance, and it's not like other sports where you get judged off of your performance because, you know, like say in basketball or, you know, football, you're trying to score points, and if you score more points than the other team, you win, right? But in this, it's not like, how should I say this? Well, it's not like, you know, you're physically like scoring a touchdown or a point, right? Like it's like a whole thing put together where you got to rely on people. And, you know, I'd imagine the judges are super detail oriented, because the thing is in football and basketball, I'll pull on football more because that's what I know. But like if a couple of people do something wrong, you could still score on the play. You know, like there's definitely been plays where I've played, you know, running back and quarterback, and like 3 out of my 5 linemen would all miss their blocks. But all it takes is like you yourself breaking a couple tackles and you could still score, right? But in cheer, if a couple people mess up, there's no way you could really get those points back. Yeah. Am I right?
Yeah. So
there you go.
If there's even like one little like bobble in a stunt, like you don't even fall, you just kind of like move a way you're not supposed to, like that docks you. Right. Or like if one person misses their tumbling pass and like they fall, that docks you a lot. And like even if you hit your routine like perfect and we call it like a 0 reduction routine, like that doesn't even guarantee you winning. So it's like,
really?
Yeah, so it's not like, oh, you hit a routine, now you won. It's like, okay, you hit your routine, so that means you got 0 reductions, but these things also have to like score you high enough. So like our stunt could not be as good as this other school's stunt. So that means they scored more for like creativity or like difficulty. So like we could have done 1 spin, but they did 1.5. So that makes their difficulty go up. And even though we both hit 0, they could win because they have like slightly more difficult. Yeah. Or like they were a little sharper or like just something like that. So it's very complex and like hard to explain and even understand, but yeah.
I mean, that made sense to me, you know. So at that point, basically, then sometimes it's not all on, you know, the competitors, the players, the cheerleaders, right? Like it comes down to the coaches having to put together a good routine that pushes y'all while not hurting y'all too much. Is that right?
Yeah, it's kind of like finding the balance of like, what's the highest difficulty we can do to perfection, but that's still gonna like get us difficulty points, but that we can execute well. Because if you're doing something that's really difficult but it looks sloppy, like you're not gonna get those points at all. You'll get docked like even more. So you just have to do like what you can do the hardest, the best. If that makes sense.
Yeah, no, that makes sense.
I don't know.
Yeah, no, you're good. That makes sense to me. So from what I'm hearing, it's just super detail oriented, right? Yeah. And like, I mean, it's just one of those sports, and there's a ton of sports like this, but it's one of those sports where like, you can't just have one good cheerleader, or you even like, you can't just have half the squad good and the other half is like you gotta pick up their weight. Am I right?
Yeah. Okay. Like everyone has to do their part or else it won't work.
Okay.
So.
Yeah. And that's tough because, you know, as a coach for me, like I always tell my kiddos, like, yo, you know, you could control yourself. Like you don't need everyone else doing their job for you to succeed sometimes. But, you know, in a very team-centered or I guess team-centric kind of sport like cheer, like it seems like that's just not possible.
I mean, I think you still have to have that mindset of doing the very best that you can and like performing the best that you can, because if you don't have that, like if everyone does their part, then it'll go well. So I think our coaches always told us, like, just focus on yourself. You can't worry about the teammate next to you, because if you're worrying about them, you're not focusing on yourself.
Of course, yeah.
So we still kind of have that mindset of really taking into consideration, like, am I doing my very best? Am I, like, executing everything the way that I should? And if everyone's doing their job, then in the end, it'll turn out fine. But if you're worrying about everyone else, then you'll probably miss something that you should be focusing on.
Yeah, and that totally makes sense, for sure. So we've already talked about some of the difficulties in cheer, but let's make it a little bit personal. Personally, for you, what were some of the challenges with cheer? Whether it was, the time commitment or the wear and tear on your body, because you're definitely getting thrown around a ton. So I can't imagine that's like, something that doesn't come with wear and tear, especially after 7 years. That's a pretty long time, So why don't you go ahead and talk about some of the challenges for you when it came to cheer?
I think both of the things you said are very accurate. Like, time commitment definitely is something that took a lot of getting used to, like both in high school and in college, just because it is a lot of extra time, but I think it's all worth it. But that was definitely a hard thing too, just going into college, because it was an even bigger time commitment than I was used to. So just balancing that with school and college life, I don't know, it was a lot.
Yeah.
But I don't know, every game and everything still made it worth it, because you're just like, you get really involved in the community because you're part of like all the games, and you kind of get to see like the backside of it. Like, you're like really in the game, and that's like something that a lot of people don't get to experience, and like you get to see all the things that go on behind the scenes with athletics, and that's like a really cool thing to see. But yeah, it's also hard too. But yeah, the wear and tear on my body has been super fun. I feel like now that I stopped, it like all hit me at once.
Yeah.
So like while I was in it, I was like fine. And I think that was because I was like stretching a lot more and like, I don't know, working out more, I guess, probably. Not working out as much now, but it's fine. But yeah, so it's kind of all hit me now that I'm done with it. But I still wouldn't change it. So.
Okay.
Yeah.
No, yeah. And I mean, like, that just comes with, you know, loving a sport. Now, there's certain sports and just things in general. It doesn't have to be a sport. Anything where if you love it enough, like, you do whatever, right? And it's really not that big of a worry because, you know, you enjoy being there. And, like, I totally get that. In football, like, I have really bad shoulders. Like, oh my gosh. Every time I move my shoulders or try to do a pull-up nowadays, like, I definitely hear some cracks. And
that's fun.
I know. A shout out to the homie who dislocated my shoulder like 3 times in a game. But anyways, it's you know, it's wear and tear like that, but that makes it worth it, right?
Yeah.
And so that's totally understandable. So last week we talked about burnout. Obviously you weren't here, so I'll kind of just give you a little summary. I was talking about I started feeling burnout symptoms in middle school just because it was a constant thing, you know. And you know, football culture in Texas is insane. It took me like basically living in Colorado for almost 6 or 7 years to realize that it's not normal to have like, you know, stadiums bigger than your own college cheering for a bunch of little, you know, 8th graders or even high schoolers at that point. It's not normal to be putting in so much work, to be putting in 5-day a week, you know, practices along with whatever practices you do with your homies and teammates on the side, you know. And I mean, like I said, I don't regret it. Like, I still met some great players. I met some guys who are in the NFL right now doing their thing and whatnot. And it's great, you know, but at the time, I definitely felt the burnout. And it wasn't really until I came to Colorado where I felt that burnout. And we haven't really talked about that a whole ton, you know, like at least like about my, you know, I guess sports experience or yours for that matter. So here we go. And it was just a totally different culture. You know, for me, football was fun because I already loved the sport, so there's that. But there's just so much that went into it, and there's like so much community commitment to making football experiences for kids that great so that you could get the most out of them. And I think in Texas they knew that. You know, they knew like basically spoiling their kids would, you know, give them that taste of like, you know, just that little taste of like being a little bit greedy and like loving the hype and like the crowds and all the stuff you get and whatnot. And I loved it, you know, and I loved my community. I loved, you know, my teammates, my coaches and whatnot. And I ultimately knew like if I put in the work and if I get to start for at least 2 or 3 years for the Plano Wildcats, then I'm for sure going to get a scholarship. Because in Texas, I don't know if you knew this, but you know, most, I guess, 5A, 6A top tier like football programs, they put out a lot of football players. Like you could get a scholarship or a playing opportunity to a D1 school, D2, D3 schools. Like the school back in my hometown puts out at least 10 to 14 players each year on scholarship just for football, and that's not even including basketball, everything else, which is its own monster as well. And so I felt like if I put in the work, then that'd be worth it, you know, because I'll get a scholarship, I'll be able to go to college, which nobody in my family has ever done before, and it's a big thing. And then coming to Colorado, it was just different. Like there wasn't a guarantee that if I played for I'm going name drop because I already did, if I played for Doherty High School or TCA or Liberty, that I would get a scholarship anywhere. You know, like it'd have to be one of those things where I'd have to be exceptional. Plus, you know, I just didn't really vibe with the culture, and like it was just different. Like in Texas, I played with a lot of Latinos, Mexicans, like African Americans. Here it was very Caucasian to say the least, you know, and it was just different, and that definitely contributed to why I quit sports along with a bunch of other family problems and just not feeling supported. But anyways, with all that being said and that little recap, by the way, check out the last episode if you haven't yet. Did you ever go through, I guess, burnout symptoms or have thoughts like maybe this is a little bit too much and whatnot? Because I know eventually you did, you know, decide to quit cheer before your senior year of college. But that was more because, you're going to be a teacher, right?
Yeah.
And you got all these commitments. And I get it because I basically went through a lot of the same thing, like student teaching, practicums, all that. And it's hard. I couldn't imagine playing a sport and doing all that, and graduating and being the best teacher you could possibly be. But before that, I would say, have you ever had any burnout symptoms or thoughts about quitting?
Honestly, not really. But
really?
I think it's because every year was so different for me. In high school, I said my freshman year I got to compete. Then after that, we got a new coach every single year.
Wow.
Which made it really hard to cheer. Just I never wanted to quit, but we really wanted to compete as a team. But since we got a new coach every year, the athletic department just didn't think it was a good idea to make a new coach have to do competitions, so we just never got to do that, even though the entire team wanted to do that. So that was something that I always wanted, and every year me and my teammates fought for and went into the athletic department and talked to the athletic director all the time, and we're please let us compete, and he's no.
Yeah.
So then I honestly didn't even think I would have the opportunity to cheer in college, just because coming from a high school that didn't compete, and I knew colleges were very competitive and just their skill level was really high, and I didn't really think I had that skill level. But luckily, my coach at UNC saw that potential in me, which I'm so grateful for, and she gave me that opportunity to cheer there. And so my first 2 years I actually wasn't on the mat to compete. My freshman year I kind of expected that. I didn't really think I would, just because I didn't have the tumbling skills, and I was still new to just the whole competitive environment, and so I wasn't expecting to compete that year. And then sophomore year I kind of had a little more hope that I would be able to, but then I ended up not being able to, so I wasn't on the mat that year. But then I got put in as an alternate for a little while one of our flyers was out because she got injured, and I was so close to being on the mat, but then she got better, which obviously I'm so grateful she got better.
Yeah.
But so I think every year I was just pushing to have that opportunity to compete, because that was something I'd always dreamed of. This sounds so dramatic, but
No,
since I was
okay.
little, I watched it on TV because it's on TV.
Yeah.
And I was wow, that looks so cool. I want to do that one day. And I was so close to that opportunity. Okay, I made it into college. That's where they compete. And freshman year, okay, I didn't get it, but there's next year I could do it. So then just keep pushing myself, trying to get those skills that I need to be on the mat. And then finally my third year I got the skills, and I was finally on the mat, and that was probably one of the best moments of my whole cheer career. It was so cool. So yeah, I think just having that motivation throughout that whole time kept me going. And when I was, I don't know, starting to get tired of it, because being an alternate, that wasn't the funnest thing on earth. You pretty much just have to, you're there to support your team, and you have to know the routine, and you don't just have to know one person's routine, you have to know everyone's routine, because you don't know who's going to get hurt.
That's fair.
So I had to know all of the flyers' routines, because if one of them was gone or if one of them was injured, I'd have to go in, and they don't have time to teach me her routine, so I have to already know it. But so it's kind of hard just sitting there at practice, okay, you just have to sit there and learn it, but you don't actually get to do it unless one of them's hurt, which isn't ideal circumstances, because they're your teammates. You obviously don't want them getting hurt. So when it was finally that year for me, it was definitely so worth it. And it was a good ending to it, because then I knew it was time for me to focus on the next part of my life with teaching, but it was the best way to end my cheer career, I guess.
Yeah, for sure. And that's honestly such an awesome story, because I'm gonna be honest, I'm definitely coming from, a position of privilege, where in football, obviously every game is competitive, but in cheer, it seems one of those sports that could definitely be marginalized from program to program. It just depends what it was, you know what I mean? And so, hats off to you. You worked hard, and you got to where you wanted to be, and you did what you wanted to do, and that's something not a lot of people could say, honestly. Yeah. And because I did it. I wanted to play college football, but obviously life happens, and there's stuff that you just can't control sometimes, you know? And sometimes you can't control, your playing time, because there's somebody better than you, and it happens, and an injury happens, and it gives you that opportunity, so you never know. So hats off to you. That's awesome. That's such a great story. But
Thanks.
So with that being said, no, you had a great 7-year career, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think you'd agree and say
Yeah.
that it was super fun. You had a ton of memories. Like, I mean, at least maybe it's just because y'all have to, but when I watched y'all, or when I watched you, you seemed like you were having a ton of fun out there and you were killing it. I mean, am I wrong?
No, it's a blast.
Okay.
I love it. I mean, your face kind of hurts after a while because like you have to smile the whole time, but
Yeah.
it's okay.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, I'm not gonna lie. It seemed a little bit unnatural, but I wasn't about to roast y'all
Well,
like that.
it's because our coach is like behind us being like, smile! So you're kind of like forced to, and it hurts really bad, but
Yeah.
you know, your cheek muscles get pretty strong, so
Sure.
it's cool.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. All right, so with all of that being said, I know you want to be a coach, like a cheer coach. Is that right?
Yeah.
So
Sometime soonish.
yeah. So hey, you know, if there's a program out there, you know, you have a great cheerleader here with a ton of experience.
Oh yeah.
There you go. So quick shout out right there. But what do you look forward to most when you do end up coaching?
I think just supporting my athletes, and I think cheer could be a sport that, like, at least I've noticed, it's very under-supported within athletic departments just because a lot of programs don't see it as a sport still. So you kind of get, like, you get the last bits of everything. Like, in high school, like, we didn't get access to the gym to practice, so we had to practice, like, in this little hallway where it was probably not very safe to practice cheerleading. But, like, the other sports had first dibs for the gym for, like, all the times, like, for 6 a.m. practices, so we couldn't do that. For, like, after school, so, like, we couldn't do that. And, like, if we wanted to get in the gym to, like, have like all our mats rolled out, we would have to do that like months in advance for them to even like let us in there. So I think just giving my athletes like a voice and like really listening to them, and if they want to compete, giving them that opportunity to compete, because I think in high school, I want to coach high school. So
Yeah.
giving them that opportunity to compete in high school, because I think it could open up a lot of opportunities for them, like with colleges if they want to cheer in college, and just seeing that competitive side of them, because I didn't really get to see that competitive side of me until it was literally my last time performing, which was like sad, because I was like, wow, I like love this competitive side of me that like I never really saw brought out because I didn't have that opportunity. So giving them that opportunity. So yeah.
For sure, yeah. So like, you know, having somebody who would advocate for them, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I totally get that, you know, I totally get that. And this is just something that came to mind, but when I first moved here, it kind of blew my mind that there weren't, like, I don't know, like middle school sports in Colorado is way different than Texas, to be honest. But it blew my mind that there weren't cheer squads in middle school. Was that right for you over at TCA?
Yeah, it started in high school. So I would say most like school cheer programs in Colorado start in high school. But then there is this whole other side of like All-Star, which honestly is becoming like really big.
Right.
Like gyms, there's a new gym in Colorado called Steel Athletics, and that's one that's like growing a ton. And like I said before, like you could start as early as 4 years old, and like those kids are like crazy. Like they're already doing skills that like I can't even do. Like how are you doing that? It's
For
like
sure.
insane. And by the time they're like in high school, they're incredible, and like competing at such a young age, it just like opens up this whole new door of cheer that like a lot of people don't know about. So if there's not school programs, I think looking at all-star programs is definitely like, it's different than like typical school game day experiences, because all-star gyms don't like cheer for other sports. It's like strictly competitive. That's all they do. So yeah, but that's like the middle school alternative, I guess.
That's so weird. Wow. I mean, okay, maybe it's not that weird, because I know there are other sports where, like, you know, you can't play in middle school, but you could do in high school for sure. But wow, that's really interesting. So that's crazy in itself. That just shows, you know, the difference between cheer and other sports, and you know, definitely the differences for sure. And that's not even really sport related. That's just outside of the sport, really, and advocating and getting into politics and whatnot, I'm sure, right? So would you ever like coach one of those like younger levels, younger age groups and whatnot, or is that just not like something
I don't know.
you'd want to do?
I think since like I don't have experience with All-Star, it's like so different, I feel like, just because it's so competitive, and like I don't know, I think I've always been more leaning towards the side of like coaching for high school, just because you have both aspects. You have the game day and the competitive aspect of it. So I don't know. I mean, I like little kids a lot. Obviously, I'm going to teach them, but
yeah,
I think I'd want to stick with high school just because like that's what I'm used to.
Interesting.
For cheer, at least.
Yeah, no, for sure, and that makes a ton of sense to me for sure. All right, so I mean, this isn't on our little docket, but would you let your kid do that?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
All right, because I know there are some people like, I don't know, I mean, obviously the sports are different, but with football, but there are definitely some, parents or adults, I don't know, things could change. I'm not a parent, by the way, and she's not either. Nope. Way too young for that. but there are definitely parents who, they might not want to put their kids into such competitive environments like that. I know for me, I didn't do that stuff, and I still love football, but in Texas, I was like maybe the only kid out of 60 on my team that did not play youth sports for at least 2 or 3 years on that level, and it was crazy. And it's youth sports in general is really crazy. I mean, this is what ultimately this mini-series is all about, youth sports and whatnot. So yeah, I mean, but you would you put that put them in a competitive environment.
Yeah, I think it's a really cool opportunity because you can like grow so much.
For sure.
And I wish I would have done that when I was little. So like if my kids want to, like I'm all for that. I would love it.
No, for sure. I mean, I totally get it. Like I didn't get to do, youth sports or summer camps like that. But if I could provide that for my kids, then for sure, get after it. Make me some money when y'all go pro.
So, like, with other sports, they're like, is the opportunity for them to go pro? And, like, with cheer, after you graduate college or, like, age out of an all-star gym, like, that's it. Like, there's no pro cheer. Like, there's, like, Dallas Cowboy cheerleaders, but, like, that's a dance team. Like, they don't do stunts. They might do a little bit of tumbling, but once you're, like, done with college or you reach the maximum age of, like, a gym for all-star, then like that's it. So it's like a sport that has a very limited time for you to really like be in it, and you can't really go much further, which is interesting.
Also, what you're saying is that you can't profit off of it either, like get a salary. Okay.
Nope.
Wow, that sucks. I personally didn't know there was a difference between like I guess pro football, NFL cheerleaders and that, but I mean, I guess that makes sense now that you really think about it. I know there are some cheerleaders though that go into that, and that's kind of like like an avenue that they go down, but it's not the same though, right?
Yeah, no, because I don't know, it still takes like a lot of hard work to be on those teams, but it's just different from what cheer has like grown to be, because they're not doing like the high level stunts. They're like focusing mainly on like sideline dances,
sure,
and a little bit of tumbling and stuff like that, and like cheers. So it's not really like as diverse and complex as like cheer has grown to be.
Okay. No, yeah,
so,
and that totally makes sense. All right, so we're gonna go into the next question because we're kind of closing up here. But so imagine that you're a coach, right? Okay. So just imagine that. We'll say high school level, and you have either a girl or a boy, because boys could definitely cheer. That's something that I feel like is getting disproven. Like getting disproven as time goes on, that boys can't cheer. I mean, that whole stereotype, because they definitely do.
Oh, they're vital to our team.
Oh yeah, and they have a role for sure. I mean, I've seen it, and I'm sure you've experienced it for sure. But imagine that. So you have a high schooler, right? Mm-hmm. And they kind of want to get into extracurriculars and stuff like that, like do a sport, something like that. But if you were to talk to them, trying to convince them to join your cheer squad, what are some of the benefits or things you would pitch to them to get them to join?
I would say that it creates a really good community and just like team bond. Like the team that you're part of really just becomes your family because you spend so much time with them, and you just have like a different level of trust like amongst everyone, because like we said before, like every single person on the team is incredibly vital to a routine, and like you just, I don't know, you all grow super close through that. So it makes a really good community just to have to support you in things other than cheer, just in life. And like that's where I met, like, well, I didn't meet them there, but that's where like my friends that have become my best friends, like we cheered together throughout all of high school. And like I think that's one of the reasons why we're all so close, like still to this day. Like me and my friends from high school are like still all best friends. And like that's kind of uncommon, I think. So I think that's something that I really appreciate from cheer. And I think also just the way you can push yourself, you can never like stop growing and learning from cheer. There's like always a new skill that you can get. There's always a different stunt you can get. You can always do it better. So you can really never stop improving. And then also just like the complexity of it. Like there's so many aspects of cheer that I really think people just fall in love with. Like for me, my favorite part was stunting, but for someone else, their favorite part was tumbling or jumping or like different things. So there's just so many different parts that people can fall in love with and grow. And yeah, I don't know. There's so many good things about it. I love it.
No, for sure. And hey, I love that passion. You know, that's the type of energy we need out of future coaches and whatnot. You know, and you know, I respect that. I respect that because like I totally feel, you know, the same way about football. You know, it's one of those things that I love, and I would probably say a lot of the same things. You know, I wouldn't say that it would be just as challenging as cheer. You know, because cheer definitely seems like there are like an unlimited amount of challenges, right? In football, you know, it's it's a difference of sport. You know, it's just a difference of sport. So I totally get that. And for a lot of people, you know, that's appealing, like having something that pushes them and pushes them to get better. Because I think high schoolers and, you know, just kids in general, you know, from when they could first start competing in a sport, moving up, they want to be challenged. They want to have fun, because I really don't think you could have fun playing a sport while not being challenged. Like, it might be fun, like, every now and then, like, having a season where you're, like you and your team are just killing it, you're on top of everything, like, everything's going great, and you're just dominating all the competition. Like, one season for that, and then, you know, winning the championship, like, that's awesome, you know. But, you know, when you get to the point where you're just doing that over and over again and you're not really getting challenged, there's definitely a little bit of disconnect. Would you say so as well?
Yeah, and I think with cheer, like every year brings like new challenges. There's a new team, like you have new people, and that creates a completely different environment and like completely different set of skills. And then you create a completely new routine, which has its own challenges in and of itself. So I think that's one of the cool things about cheer. Like every single year is so different, because it's new people in a completely different routine that you're working towards. Mm-hmm. And yeah, so that's something that's different about it, I guess, too.
Yeah.
Which is cool.
No, for sure. All right, so last question here. But if you could go back in time right now, what would you tell your past self at the start of your cheering career?
I think I would tell myself that it's going to be like a hard journey, but it's going to be worth it. So keep pushing myself. And then also just to trust myself and to trust my teammates. Because I think when I started cheer, I was like terrified of stunting. It was so scary. I did not want to do it. Like I did because I wanted to be able to do it, but it's just like kind of scary for people to like throw you in the air.
Yeah.
And so I think that was something that I kind of always carried with me, just like a little bit of fear of like, oh my gosh, what could happen if this goes wrong? And like, that's definitely not a good mentality to have in cheer. So I would have told myself just to trust myself and have more confidence in myself, because once I like snapped out of that and was like, oh, I could do this, oh, I trust myself, oh, I trust these people around me, then like it made like a world of difference. And just trusting my teammates, because if I don't trust the people who are holding me, then I'm not going to be able to do my job as well. And so I think just having that mindset of I know what I'm doing and my teammates know what I'm doing, and just trusting them and trusting my coaches that they know what's best. And yeah.
Okay. So self-confidence, right? Self-confidence, right? Okay. No, I mean, that totally makes sense. And I mean, I can't blame you. Like, honestly, if I had to rely on one of my linemen, like, I love y'all, but I had to rely on them to throw me in the air and catch me, that would not be the move. I'm telling you right now. Like, hey, shout out to all the linemen that have ever blocked for me, that have helped me score touchdowns and whatever. But like, I really don't want to do that, and so I totally get it. Like, it's a different level of trust. Like, you gotta really trust somebody. Like, I feel like I mean, feel free to argue with me here, but I feel like it's one of those things where you can't just fake trust somebody. You know?
Yeah. And it's like, it was definitely hard switching over to college because like in high school, I like grew up with these people, like I knew them all really well. And then coming to college, it's like, okay, hi, I've never met you. Now I'm going to throw you in the air. And it's just like different because you have to just like trust them right off the bat. But it ends up like making you all super close and just like, I don't know, you just want to protect each other in every aspect of life because, I don't know, you just grow so close and bond with each other in such a different way because there have been some scary moments where it's like, oh my gosh, that could have been really bad, but you just literally saved my life. Thank you. So it's like that kind of creates a special bond when that happens.
Yeah.
And so that's why I think like cheer teams become so close. And I mean, all teams do, but specifically with cheer right now, just, I don't know, looking back at all the different teammates I had, like we all had such a unique, special bond that I'm like so close to all of them still. And I think it's because of those moments that like you grow with each other, you're with each other in like the really hard moments where like you're trying to get a skill so bad and then finally you all get it together. And it's because you all put in that effort and that work and you finally made it hit. And like that's one of the best feelings ever. So
yeah, no doubt. And I mean, well, that goes the same with any sport, really. I mean, well, I wouldn't say any sport. It's a little bit different because I know the best teams, at least the best teams that I've been on or played on or whatever, they've always trusted each other and there wasn't a doubt, you know. But in cheer, it definitely feels like it's not just the best teams that have to do that. It's pretty much every squad because there's a lot going on, you know. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay.
I agree.
Yeah, and so that just kind of adds to the difficulty because, I mean, you know, like I don't know how should I say this? I don't know how you'll approach it as a coach, but like for me, if I was coaching cheer, which I don't know anything, so there's that. But if I was coaching cheer, I wouldn't blame a kid for not, you know, having a ton of trust in their teammates right away because it's not like they're doing real easy stunts or that like, you know, any of them can't snap their neck or elbow at any moment if something goes wrong, right? How would you like? Yeah, how would you address that? How would you have your kiddos like trust each other a little bit more?
I think we kind of mentioned this earlier, but just like trusting themselves, because if they don't have that confidence in themselves, they're not going to go as hard. And like that's what a lot of my coaches would tell me. It's like, you know what to do, so just do what you know how to do. So like,
yeah,
if you put your 100% into this, then like the people that are like under you who are basing you, like they're going to do their job. But if you do something different, then that's going to screw up what they have to do. So like, for example, like in a stunt, if I don't spin fast because I'm scared and I'm like, I don't want to spin fast because that sounds terrifying, but like that's what I'm supposed to do. And if I don't do that, that makes it unsafe.
Right.
So like just having each athlete trust themselves to go 100%. And if each person does that, then it works. So if it's like hard for them to trust the people around them, just having them trust themselves. You know?
Yeah, no, for sure. That makes sense to me. All right. So, okay. Basically, I didn't mean for this to be like a whole interview because it kind of seems though like an interview as in like I'm hiring you as a cheer coach.
Oh, no, it's fine.
Yeah. But as a cheer coach or as somebody who wants to be a cheer coach, what is something that you would emphasize, you know? So like what kind of coach you would be? Because I mean, there's a ton of different ways to coach. Everyone has, you know, their own styles. I think we all know that in youth sports for sure. Personally, for me, I'm a guy that I love to get to know my kids and get to know, you know, what their family is like, what their family life is like, you know, past experiences, what they love to do and whatnot, because I just need to get to know them, you know, like I can't expect them to trust me if I don't know them or if they feel like I don't know them, you know. So for me, I'm definitely a relationships guy. I want them to be a good person. And then, you know, winning, I mean, look, they'll be playing the game, but, you know, as long as they're doing what they got to do, it's up to me to plan out their success. And, you know, if they're doing what they got to do, then there's no worry there. But for me, I'm definitely a relationships type of coach. What kind of coach do you hope to be?
I would say pretty similar. Like, okay. I think focusing on building like that family with the team right away, because I think that's important for teams. And like I've been on teams that are like that, and it makes the year so much better. Like when you go through hard times, then like you could just rely on that, which is really important, I think. And especially in high school, I think students like really need to have that support because some kids don't have that at home. So just creating like where cheer can kind of be that outlet for them to like feel safe and I don't know, be able to like have their family if like, I don't know, if their family life isn't great, creating that. But also being someone who pushes them like out of their comfort zone, because I had coaches who did that for me and like they saw that I could do something that I didn't really think I could do, and then they pushed me to do it, and then I was like, oh, I actually can do that. That's cool. So like seeing the potential in every athlete and pushing them to do that. Because I think a lot of times athletes like don't push themselves because they don't think they can.
Yeah.
But having someone who is really like saying, I see that in you and I know you could do it. And like I had my college coach did that to me for me, and I think that made like a world of difference. And then like some coaches in high school did that too. And I think I like wouldn't be where I ended up without them. So being that.
No, for sure.
Athletes.
For sure, yeah. I mean, it's all about setting those expectations and pushing them, challenging them. That's how you get the best results, in my opinion. So, all right. Hey, so first off, I appreciate you coming onto the podcast. It was great hearing your perspective and whatnot.
Of course, it was fun.
Yeah, for sure. It was great. And you know what? I mean, who knows? Maybe we'll have you on for, I don't know. Maybe we'll have you on in the future.
Cool.
But I appreciate you coming on. I mean, any last comments, last words you want to say?
No, I think that's it. I think it was cool just to be able to share some insight onto cheer, because a lot of people don't get to like hear about all the ins and out of it, and it's really growing sport that's complex. So it was really cool to just dive into that. So thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course. And hey, I support it. You know, I'm a physical educator, so it's okay. I'm not going to say I have to, but you know, I want my students to have as many, physical activity opportunities as possible, and that's just my philosophy and whatnot. So hey, I support it. It's a great sport. It's not an easy one. So if you want something that's challenging, something that'll push you definitely physically and most definitely mentally as well, do some cheer, boys and girls.
Yeah, do it. It's awesome.
For sure. But anyways, that'll wrap up the 6th episode of this mini series that we're doing on youth sports for the summer. Make sure you tune into the last 5 episodes as well. First off, I just want to say we appreciate the support. They've been doing super great. We've put out a lot of great episodes, a lot of, just deeper dives into youth sports that, personally, I wanted to do. So make sure you check that out at The Cycle 365 on Spotify, Google Podcast, honestly, pretty much any podcast platform you could think about. And be on the lookout for next week's episode. Be on the lookout for episode 40, the big 40 of the official Cycle 365 podcast. And follow us on social media. Show us some love as always. And yeah, that's it. Peace.